The presidents of the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress have urged the federal government to also enthrone service-reflective tariff and stoppage of segregation of customers. Joe Ajaero and Festus Osifo made this known on Wednesday while presenting a joint address at the May Day celebration in Abuja. In the 18-item demands presented by the Labour leaders, they said electricity privatization exercise in the country should be reviewed with the view to have it reversed. They added that they want the government to immediately roll out the CNG buses nationwide as agreed.
I'm not sure there's any fair 25%. No, there's nothing like that. What we saw is trying to capture the attention of the public service that they were not paying the contracts before now. And now they decided to bring the COSATU service. It's like paying level 1 to something to 7, a particular allowance.
The NLC and TUC hereby advise NEC and power sector operators to revise the last increase in electricity tariff within the next 1 week. Public service needs to review the contributory pension scheme. Your Excellencies and comrades, there is need to review the contributory pension scheme, which was disrupted by the enactment of the 2004 Pension Reform Act. There are complaints ranging from delay or no transmission of contributory money to Pension Fund Administration (PFA), inabilities to access the initial 25% of total contributions by retirees as stipulated by law, etc. Of most concerns is the fact that the monthly pension of those who retired under defined benefit scheme earn at least 50% monthly pension more than those who retire under the contributory pension scheme.
All workers must rise from our celebration today more determined than ever before. Build a trade union movement that will continue to work within the philosophies of traditions that propelled it into existence. The minimum wage struggle. The minimum wage struggle serves as a urgent reminder of the resistance faced by workers and the obstacles deliberately placed by government. It underscores the pressing need for unity across all levels of engagement to advance our shared objectives. We are already working together in every facet of the national minimum wage fixing process to ensure that better results are achieved, which will not only speak to the welfare of Nigerian workers, but would also assist in driving business activities around the nation.
And now joining me to talk more about what is happening at the Eagle Square, where the May Day celebration has been held in Abuja, Nigeria, is Marvelous Obomanu. Marvelous Obomanu, good afternoon to you. Hello, Marvelous, can you hear me? Well, I guess we've not been able to really establish connection with Marvelous right there, but it's something we are going to consider still during the course of this particular bulletin. But then let's move on to tell you that in Borno State, Nigerian workers are using the occasion of Workers' Day celebration to call for additional reforms in the public sector. News Central Somato Tarawa reports that Nigerian workers in Borno State also rallied round to seek fair treatment for local government employees through consideration for the implementation of promotion benefits, minimum wage for the local government employees, among other demands. And now I believe that Marvelous Obomanu can hear me now, and we have audience with him. Hello, Marvelous. Marvelous, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. We can hear you too. So tell us, what is happening right now, even as we know that the May Day celebration is still being held at the Eagle Square in Abuja?
Well, we are done for the whole celebration because the whole activity is done here. But of course, you're aware that this is the first Workers' Day celebration for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and some workers have expressed displeasure that some policies and programs of the government has further made life a bit difficult for the Nigerian workers. Talk about the cost of food items in the market, cost of transportation. Now we are seeing long field queues resurfacing in some parts of the country. We are seeing hike in electricity tariff. We are seeing hike in utility bills. So some workers say that the current government's, policies and programs have further made life difficult for some of them, and therefore they don't really have enough reasons to celebrate. So I have some workers here. Let it not be like I'm the one saying it. I have some workers down here at the Eagle Square who will be telling us more on how things are for them. Okay. All right. Well done, Ma. First of all, let me say Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you.
All right. So there are some workers here who had come expecting that maybe the government will announce a new living wage that will help to ameliorate the sufferings and plight of Nigerian workers. But sadly, that did not happen. How do you feel?
In all honesty, I'm not really glad today that the new minimum wage isn't announced, because over the years, it's been a while that the salary has been increased, but things kept rising in the market. The inflation rate is something else. In fact, as a matter of fact, what we are earning presently is like 20% of what we should be earning. So everybody came in anticipation to hear the new minimum wage, but somehow we are being disappointed by not hearing the announcement. But at the same time, being happy is a matter of choice. Whether they increase it, whether they announce it or not, we must be happy, because you have to be alive first before you can talk of salary increment or not.
Let me ask you, landlords are increasing house rents, prices of goods and services are increasing, cost of transportation, we are seeing a hike in electricity tariff, we are seeing a hike in utility bills. As a civil servant, how are you able to cope? How do you measure your expenses with salary that is constant?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. For myself, I trust in God, because saying it in all honesty, the salary is not sufficient to carry anybody, whatever they might increase it to. Because there are times I sit back and I just look at my achievements. It isn't by my salary at all, but it's been by the grace of God. It's the grace of God that has been sustaining me as a person. I don't know of others.
All right, lastly, before I let you go, the government had promised that once the new minimum wage committee wraps up with their work, a new minimum wage will be announced. But of course, you know that even the last minimum wage we have, there are some states who are yet to implement that minimum wage. So what's your take on it?
And in all honesty, the new minimum wage should be something realistic, because we all know states' capability differs. They shouldn't give us minimum wage that it will be impossible for other states to be able to cope with. But at least we expect something very good and fantastic from the federal government.
All right, Lekon, you've heard it by yourself. Some of the workers here are expecting that there will be an announcement of a new minimum wage today, but that did not happen, and some of them didn't like the way it went. But they are hopeful that once the new minimum wage committee wraps up with their job and an announcement of a new minimum wage is made, it should be something that should take care of the current economic situation Nigeria is, and something realizable.
Marvelous Bomano, thank you so much. It's quite nice to see that Nigerians are still expressing hope in God and in the government to do what is right and needful despite the challenges being faced. We thank you so much for bringing this to us. I hope to connect with you some other time. We are still talking about the Workers' Day celebration anyway, and we bring you to Lagos, where the Lagos State Labour Congress has called on the governor to look into the increment of the minimum wage and not just salary increases. Now, this request was made by the chairman, Lagos Labour Congress, Agnes Fumilayo Shesi, during the celebration of this year's Workers' Day. Now, Nigerian workers celebrate May Day under the shadow of a week-long fuel scarcity crisis. The shortage has disrupted daily activities, sparking price hikes and fueling black market patronage, leading to long queues at gas stations. News Central's Adeshewo Dushoga reports.
The soldiers that come, they buy petrol, they put it in jerry cans, they sell it right in front of these people. It's ridiculous.
A viral video circulating online shows a fuel scarcity crisis in Lagos from 30 years ago. The scene, eerily similar to today. Nigerians wait patiently in fuel lines, the only difference being the significantly higher price per litre. Motorists express frustration, especially with reports of stations outside Lagos selling fuel for as much as 1,000 naira per litre.
This May Day falls amidst a heat wave, an unreliable electricity supply, rising inflation, and now fuel scarcity. A perfect storm for a dampened holiday spirit.
This is a situation whereby there is nothing we can do. Are you getting that? We need fuel. We're supposed to be at home, be relaxing. But simply because we did not get it on time. That's the reason why you can see that we came here to come and queue.
They should have ended this like many years ago, dropped down the price. I mean, we're producing, what's it called? We're producing here. Why are we not having access to it? We have crude oil. What's our problem?
Government is trying their best, but we can still do a lot better in terms of putting our refinery in good position. We learned that Port Harcourt refinery has been done, but we are not yet seeing the output in terms of production outside there.
Throwing light on the scarcity of the commodity across the nation, the Public Relations Officer of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, Chinedu Kadike, said it has become a bit of a challenge to source the product because most refineries in Europe are undergoing turnaround maintenance.
The NNPCL should, in all this way, since they say that the vessels have arrived, and anyone from now, fuel will be pushed down, and everywhere will have products. So we are ready. Our trucks are there to load, and once loading starts, you will see that we will swing into actions. Products will be everywhere.
This marks the second major fuel crisis under the President Bola Tinubu administration since the removal of petrol subsidies, which caused a significant rise in commodity prices. Nigerians hope for a swift resolution to the crisis and a return to normalcy. In Lagos, for News Central, Adeshewo Dushoga.
Now, Nigeria's Minister of Works, David Umahi, says the federal government will on Wednesday pay 2.75 billion naira compensation to property owners affected by the demolition necessary for the construction of the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway spanning from Channel 0 to Channel 3. The minister revealed this information on Wednesday during a stakeholders meeting held in Lagos State. He said more compensation is expected to be paid in coming days. Away from that, Nigeria's House of Representatives has advocated for a special fund to help implement measures that will improve the safety of schools that are prone to attacks by bandits and criminal elements. The Speaker of the House made this known following the resumption of plenary after over 6 weeks recess, expressing the House's commitment to support security agencies combat kidnapping, banditry and terrorism. It called for a committee and community-based approach with the full participation of community leaders to help safeguard schools across the country.
We will not allow the ambitions of our children to be thwarted by fear. The House stands united with the armed forces and will advocate for comprehensive strategies to safeguard our schools. This involves not only physical security measures such as fencing, security personnel, and surveillance technologies, but also community-based strategies that involve local leaders in our security framework. On our part, we will continue to ensure that our security agencies have the necessary tools and legislation to act effectively. To this end, we recommend the establishment of a dedicated fund specifically for school safety. This fund will support the implementation of advanced security measures and training of security personnel and communities on strategies for protecting educational environments.
Now, the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime has pledged to support Nigeria's efforts in the fight against illegal wildlife trade and promote the use of technology in protecting the nation's biodiversity. This was made known during the UNODC's Wildlife Sensitization and Awareness Competition and Awards Ceremony in Abuja for young Nigerian innovators between the ages of 18 and 35. Idong Joseph reports.
Nigeria is blessed with a rich biodiversity, as the nation boasts of over 22,000 recorded species of animals, including insects, over 5,000 species of plants, and over 800 species of birds. While the country's ecosystem supports the survival of a wide variety of wildlife like African elephants, pangolins, and chimpanzees, amongst others, the uncontrolled activities of farmers and poachers are putting some of these species at risk of extinction.
A lot of us only interface or think of wildlife as consumption. For a lot of us, is bushmeat or something in the forest. I don't know how many of us have come in contact with wildlife.
As part of efforts to draw awareness to wildlife crime issues and the need to preserve and protect Nigeria's biodiversity, the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime marks the creativity of young people in creating awareness using digital innovations.
Who better to champion the cause of wildlife sensitization and awareness than the young people? And that was why UNODC came up with the idea in commemoration of World Wildlife Day to do a sensitization competition amongst young people.
I was even overthinking entering the competition because I felt like, oh, what if I don't win? But like, I'm so glad I actually did, and my mom is going to be so proud. Like when she gets up, she's going to scream like, oh my God. So I'm just like so excited.
So I'm like, okay, I need to do this because I need to use my talent to show the world that that wildlife is going extinct and we need to do something to prevent it. So I had to participate.
With the competition focusing on the use of digital tools by young Nigerians for wildlife sensitization, the UN pledged its support to combating wildlife crime in the country.
UNODC is in the process of supporting the government of Nigeria to develop a wildlife sensitization strategy for Nigeria, and some of the submissions received will truly enrich and scale up sensitization efforts in the country.
While the need for joint efforts against wildlife crime cannot be overemphasized, stakeholders are calling on all citizens to embrace the responsibility of protecting Nigeria's biodiversity and ensuring that threatened species do not go into extinction. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
We now head to South Africa, where trade unions, organizations, and workers alike across the country are joining the rest of the world in commemorating International Workers' Day under the theme, Building a Stronger COSATU and Mobilizing for the ANC election victory in the Congress of South African Trade Unions. The unions joined other workers and other trade unions in celebration of the day. The Congress of South African Trade Unions is calling for collective efforts to help reduce unemployment in South Africa. It says Workers' Day is an opportunity to reflect on progress made by labor movements, but the Federation says it is also time for people to stand up against corruption. Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will address thousands of workers in Cape Town and march in solidarity with the people of Palestine. Now, we are being joined by the COSATU spokesperson, Matthew Parks, and he joins me from Cape Town in South Africa. Matthew, it's nice to have you around on the news.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
So we see that South Africa is joining the rest of the world in a celebration of this memorable day for workers. So for you, what significance does this day bring to COSATU and the workers?
Yeah, look, Workers' Day has been a rallying point for workers since the late 1880s when it first started in the US, in Chicago. Within the South African liberation struggle of the past century, it was a major rallying point for workers to mobilize, to organize, to unionize in support of better working conditions, in support of a democratic state. It's a chance to reflect and to remember those who've sacrificed so much. It's also a chance to recognize and to celebrate the victories workers have achieved since we became a democratic state in 1994. from our progressive constitution and our labor rights, labor laws, and enhancing the rights of workers, to the investment by the state in working class communities, from free education to healthcare and social support for those who are unemployed. It's also a moment to put pressure on government and the private sector to do better, to do much more faster, to improve the lives of workers.
You mentioned a couple of things that workers will be in need of to help them feel among and, of course, live better in the country. But then that would have to do with policies being pulled forward, not only by the citizens, but then by lawmakers. But then over the years, we've seen that workers have been excluded when it comes to decision making and policy making in the country. So how does this affect the workers?
So we don't know about that. In South Africa, workers are included in decision making by law. That's very clear in our constitution since 1994. So workers have been at the forefront of discussing laws and policies. The constitution requires and puts an obligation upon Parliament to do extensive public participation when any laws, budgets are processed, and laws have been returned back to Parliament by the Constitutional Court when they have been found wanting in that regard. All legislation before goes to Parliament must go to NEDLAC, which is a social dialogue forum consisting of government, business, and labour. Before any legislation go to Parliament, must first go there by law, and workers are represented there by COSATU, by other federations. So we've engaged on it, and at times we've been able to make real impacts. Many legislation has actually been tabled at Parliament by COSATU, by trade unions, which improve the lives of workers. But of course, government also can't only just listen to trade unions, it must also listen to businesses, to civil society, to political parties, and so forth. But no, we can't say that South African workers are excluded. They're not. That's been a major victory that COSATU managed to achieve in 1994. Workers are part at the table, they discuss. We don't get everything we want, but we get a huge issue. And also that we recognize and we appreciate that many people have graduated and been elevated from the trade union movement to the highest positions in the state. The president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, was a founding general secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. Many of the ministers in the cabinet, from the finance minister to the minister of trade and industry, minister of labor, many other ministers actually come from the trade union movement too. So in South Africa, I think we're fortunate that workers' voices are heard and they're not marginalized.
Well, in all of these askings, one thing we need to also talk about is the fact that among these trade unions, there are factionalized members and parties who are not really gelling together, and is making it hard to chart a formidable front in terms of what is being asked for from government. And we are also aware, Matthew, that getting fair wages is one of the major critical challenges workers face across board. So how can we now have unions come together to speak to governments in one voice so that they can do what is needful and cater well for the workers?
Yeah, no, look, we would love all unions. In fact, we would love to have a single union for each industry. That's in the rallying call of COSATU. We would want to see one federation for the country. We're not there yet. At times it is difficult. At times people are protecting their territory and the turf and so forth. That does weaken workers' voice. Doesn't help when workers are fragmented. But I think I'm still pleased nonetheless that the majority of workers who are unionized belong to COSATU. COSATU has been able to use that voice in the alliance with the ANC, in government, at Parliament, at NEDLAC, in the public discourse, in bargaining councils. That's what we've been able to achieve many objectives. But nonetheless, it's something we do work for. We work quite close with other federations too, and even unions outside of federations, especially since COVID-19, when we were faced with an extraordinary global pandemic. We needed collectively to work together. So yes, at times we have political differences. At times we might find ourselves within different organizational structures. But on many issues, maybe 90% of issues, we actually have a common understanding of issues, and we actually work quite closely together. Even at times, we'll put aside our political differences because we recognize when you come to the issues of saving jobs and unemployment, there's no recognition of the color of your T-shirt.
Matthew, finally, before I let you go, we know that South Africa will be heading to the polls in the next 28 days. And COSATU has been telling its members to vote for ANC. I'd like to find out why and what COSATU is hoping to gain from this political move.
Yeah, so workers are not apolitical. Workers are voters. They have a vested interest. We need an efficient and capable government, a stable government, to address the many challenges workers are facing, from a 41% unemployment rate to entrenched levels of crime and corruption to deep levels of poverty and inequality. To see how can we grow the economy, how can we build an efficient state to deliver public services to working class communities. workers will see every election time a whole variety of parties pop up out of nowhere, making all sorts of promises under the sun. But the only party workers have ever known to be with workers in the struggles, from when our predecessor COSATU was banned, to when COSATU was formed, to when we had to fight for a democratic state, to draft our democratic constitution, to put in place our progressive labor laws, to investing in working class communities, to managing the COVID pandemic, to implementing a minimum wage, which has raised the wages of 6 million workers. Only one party has been part of that journey with COSATU, and that's the ANC. And this is why workers, time and again, in the last 6 elections, have returned to the ANC to office every single time with the absolute majority nationally eventually.
Okay.
It's the only ally we've ever had. It's not perfect, we have ups and downs. But when you look at opposition parties on the right-wing spectrum who promise to scrap the minimum wage, to scrap our labor rights, we can't support them. We look at parties on the pseudo-left, the populist fringe elements, who promise all sorts of crazy things. We can't risk the fate of the country with them either. So the only sober, mature vehicle we've ever seen work with us is the ANC.
Okay.
That's why workers will vote for the ANC in 4 weeks' time.
All right. Matthew Parks, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Let's now take you to the Horn of Africa nation, where Kenya's President William Ruto has deployed the military to evacuate everyone living in flood-prone areas after 171 people were killed since March as torrential rains pound the East African country. Seasonal rains, amplified by the El Nino weather pattern, have devastated Kenya, with flood waters engulfing villages and threatening to unleash even more damage in the weeks to come. In the worst single incident that killed nearly 50 villagers, including children, a makeshift dam burst in the Rift Valley before dawn on Monday, sending a torrent of water and mud gushing down a hill and swallowing everything in its path. The tragedy in Kamuchiri village, Nakuru County, was the deadliest episode in the country since the start of the March to May rainy season.
Na shida hii ambayo imetokea Kenya, tumepoteza watu zaidi ya 171 kufikia leo Kenya mzima katika sehemu mbalimbali kwa mambo ya mafuriko. Na kwa hivyo sio jambo rahisi. The mapping that has been done on all fragile areas that are prone to landslides and flooding, we are asking every Kenyan in such areas to leave, because the forecast is that rain is going to continue and the likelihood of flooding and people losing lives is real. And therefore, we must take preemptive action.
We now head to Gabon, where the country's transitional government, General Brice Oligui Nguema, has received propositions following a national consultation that included the temporary suspension of political parties. Oligui, who took power in a coup 8 months ago, received almost 1,000 propositions following the massive national consultation aimed at preparing a return to civilian rule. Some 680 people chosen by Oligui to represent political parties, civil societies, unions, religious orders, and minority groups spent a month meeting in the capital, Libreville, as part of the National Inclusive Dialogue. At the closing ceremony at the Presidential Palace, they delivered their findings to the general, who was proclaimed head of state by the army on August 30, 2023, after overthrowing then-President Ali Bongo Ondimba. Now, a United Nations-backed court has issued an arrest warrant for Central African Republic's former president, Francois Bozize, over possible crimes against humanity committed by the nation's military between 2009 and 2013. According to the Special Criminal Court, a hybrid jurisdiction located at the capital, Bangui, and Central African and foreign magistrates, the alleged crimes include murder, enforced disappearance, torture, rape, and other inhumane acts. Bozize, 77 years, seized power in Central Africa in 2003 in a coup before being overthrown 10 years later. He now heads the country's main rebellion and has been in exile in Guinea-Bissau since March 2023. The court has called on Guinea-Bissau's cooperation to arrest and hand over Bozize. Many thanks for being there. We now tell you that magistrates in South Africa have threatened to go on strike over the judicial pay gap between magistrates and judges. According to the association representing 800 magistrates, its members want the pay gap to be closed. For the past years, magistrates have not received any increment, according to the Association of Regional Magistrates of South Africa. The association emphasized that their roles and duties have changed since 2008, and for that, they will also be suing the Commission and the President. And now to discuss this, I'm being joined by an attorney with the University of Johannesburg's Law Clinic, Elton Romeo Hart. Thank you so much, Elton, for joining us on the news.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers up in the West.
All right. Now, magistrates, according to what we understand, are planning to go on strike over the salary gap between them and the judges. Is their plea valid? And how does this pay gap affect individual in terms of the performance of their duties?
No, indeed. So I think there is a big gap between what magistrates earn, the remuneration for magistrates, and that for judges. Obviously, the responsibilities differs also, but I think they do have a valid claim because for many, many years, they have not received any increment or an increase in their salaries. Their salaries is set, and that's what they get as a magistrate. So for the magistrates now to take this plea up, because what you know in South Africa is that most of the cases, maybe 70% of all cases, normally starts in magistrates' courts and in regional courts, and it finishes there. It does not go to high courts. It's only these high-profile cases. And then you look at the split of resources. Judges get more resources than magistrates. That's undoubtedly so, because a judge has got a clerk and a secretary, while a magistrate, he has to type his judgment by himself. And if you sit in a bail court, which sits from 8:30 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, every day of the week, when are you actually going to do your bail judgments? It means it's over weekends. They do not get compensated for overtime. So I feel magistrates have a valid plea, but the plea should not that the salaries or the increment that they're looking for should be equal to judges. And I think that's also what they say. They don't want an equal pay scale, but also in South Africa, you need to look also at the level of experience, seniority that a person brings to the post to actually do the jobs.
Well, you talked about resources not being provided during the course of the jobs or the tasks they have to take. So when you mention resources, aside being paid for extra hours they have to spend, what are you referring to?
Like what I said, like a judge in the High Court will have a judge's clerk and a secretary, while a magistrate doesn't have that luxury. Maybe the chief magistrate at a magistrate's court will have a secretary, and if push comes to a shove, a magistrate will have to go to that secretary maybe to help type. But most of the time, magistrates have to type up their own judgments. They have to do all their admin work. They have to administer their court roll by themselves, while the judge's clerk assists with the managing of the court roll. And in magistrate's court, the court rolls you'll get on an ordinary day that there's 40 cases on a court roll in magistrate's court. While in a judge's court, you might find 1 or 2 matters on the court roll. Unless you are in motion court, you might find 20 matters. But that's the same for magistrates court. You find 40 matters on the motion court roll. So judges are overworked. That's undoubtedly so. And obviously they do have a case to say, listen, yeah, we need to be looked at because our benefits. And you should know, judges also get that recess periods in the year. It's somewhere in March, somewhere in June, July, somewhere in September, and again in December. Magistrates don't get that. They have to take from their annual leave while they get recess to actually do their judgments. Where they don't sit in courts, magistrates must be in court all the time.
That's quite interesting and very elaborate. Now, should the strike go ahead, what negative impact do you think this would have on the judiciary and, of course, court processes?
Obviously, the judiciary, and I'm talking about the magistrates specifically, they work hand in hand with the NPA, the investigating or the law enforcement agencies. If the judges or the magistrates go on strike, it means there's no presiding officers that can preside over matters. Matters will have to be postponed, and then you know the story that they say justice delayed is justice denied. So cases will not, then you'll have backlogs in court. So cases will take much, much longer. Witnesses might disappear. Then you won't get justice for victims. People become uninterested in the cases because already the court rolls in magistrates' courts is so clogged that you'll find a trial date maybe 6-7 months down the line. You see what Senzo Mayua's case, there was a high court that was blocked out, and that case is sitting every day. So that's just, it shows you, it already illustrates that they can do that in the high court, but you can't do that in the magistrate's court where you say one magistrate is just designated to hear certain things. They've tried with backlog courts, but then you get trials in backlog courts. There's 14 trials on a court row, which is humanly impossible to do.
Okay, before I let you go, Elton, I'd like to find out, for a couple of years now, the magistrates' salaries or, of course, take-home pay have not been increased. I'd like to find out, what about the judges? Have their take-home pay been increased in a couple of years?
You must remember, our judges is appointed by the president, so their the remuneration scale is a little bit more, like say, better.
Okay.
If you get to a judge, remember, when you retire as a judge, you retire with pension, lots of benefits. You retire as a judge. A magistrate retires, he doesn't retire with those. He still has to pay for his medical aid. He has to pay for certain things, while the judge gets that extra perk. So that is the difference that you have, and obviously there is, I think, the difference between an entry-level judge and a sort of a mid to senior magistrate. I think there could be easily 30 to 40% difference in the salary that they get.
Okay, so that would mean that these are the disparities or the issues that the magistrates will hope that the government would need to address to close the gap. Well, Elton Romeo Hart, thank you so much for talking to us. And away from the African continent, we tell you that Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has declared violence against women a scourge and a national crisis after protests in several major cities. Meeting state premiers, Albanese on Wednesday announced a raft of measures and funding to tackle toxic male extremist views, curb deepfake pornography, and fund help for victims. So far this year, 28 women have been killed in the country, an average of 1 death every 4 days. By comparison, 14 women died in the same period last year. The deaths have sparked a reckoning with domestic violence survivors and support services demanding stricter laws at nationwide protests last week.
Today is about who we are as a nation and as a society. We recognise that governments need to act, but we also recognise that this is an issue for the whole of society, not just for governments. It's an issue for civil society, it's an issue for the media, it's an issue for all of us to work together in the national interest to deal with what is a scourge of violence against women. We want to change this. We want to change this in a way in which we all have to take responsibility because violence against women is not a women's problem to solve. It is a whole of society problem to solve.
Talking business now, artificial intelligence is revolutionizing finance, particularly in generative AI. These models act as financial detectives, uncovering hidden patterns by analyzing vast historical data. Generative AI generates trading signals, identifies investment opportunities, and strengthens strategies. Today, we will bring you this particular story, even as Elemi Ategolo, managing partner at Generative AI Consulting, shared insights on its predictive capabilities and suitability for risk management and portfolio optimization.
Models as well and other AI technology to be used not just in the data analysis, but also into predictive nature. So being able to synthesize information to then predict what outcomes, that could be in stock price, that could be in earning calls, could be in price earnings, for example. So we are seeing the use of generative AI in that environment. So not just in descriptive, but also in predictive and prescriptive aspects.
Nigerian Premier League Football Club Enyimba is set to appeal decision by the NFF Disciplinary Committee to deduct 2 points from the club's total point tally following the result of the match against Doma United being upturned after an appeal was filed by Doma United over the initial outcome of the match. Enyimba's media manager David Orji made this known on News Central Sports program In the Game, while also squashing rumors of a league withdrawal, confirming Enyimba's commitments to finishing their remaining 6 matches of the 2023-2024 season. The points deduction pushes Enyimba down to 3rd place in the NPFL table, just behind Remo Stars and Enugu Rangers.
Every possible option to actually get to the root of this, so
For me, it wasn't what I quite expected, because I can tell you authoritatively that nothing of such nature actually happened. But just as the disciplinary committee sat yesterday, the referee actually made a report, and I wouldn't really want to dwell much on the report that the referee made. But all I can tell you right now is that we've already written a letter that we want to have that matter appealed. So, and we're also looking forward to actually hearing from the appeal committee.
And that's all at this hour. But before we go, we take a look at some of our major stories. Organized labor calls for reversal of electricity tariff hike in Nigeria. UN-backed court orders arrest of former CAR President Francois Boazizi. Kenyan President Ruto orders evacuations after deadly floods. Do send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onobanjo.